Sharing the screen.
Hi, Catalina. Could you first stop sharing before then we can see Marco Blom. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. I think it's time to start. So welcome to the creativity pitches, at least the channel 1 version. I don't think we have time to introduce all the jury members, but you can recognize them on the screen by their backgrounds. I would then propose we don't lose a lot of time and move on to the first pitch of the test team. 4-minute pitch and room for questions afterwards. First by the jury members and afterwards by the public. If you can post your questions in the chat. So, please, the floor is yours, Test.
Welcome. Can you imagine a simpler way to detect a virus than by just counting? Well, that is exactly what we have done with our team. My name is Katelijne and I am representing Team Test from the Eindhoven University of Technology. Now let me explain you how we pulled this off. Guys. Oh, dit kan echt niet. The technique is very simple. The molecular recognition of the HA1 protein, which is characteristic for the influenza A virus, takes place via an ordinary sandwich immunoassay with a particle as a label, as you can see here. In the first step, particles are released in the sample, and the particles are functionalized with antibodies. The antibodies recognize the HA1 protein, and all the particles will sediment towards a surface. This surface is also functionalized with antibodies, which recognize the HA1 protein. Next, the HA1 protein is sandwiched between the particle and the antibodies. In the next step, we will flip the sample, and by means of gravitations, we let the particle sediment away from the surface. A picture is taken from the upper surface of the sample, and our software will count the particles, and it will translate it to a concentration of HA1. The aim of our test is that it can be carried out by anyone. Only a drop of saliva will be collected, and by capillary forces, it will be transported towards a sugar coating where the particles are dried. The saliva will dissolve the sugar coating, and next the particles and the HA1 will mix. Now you put the microchip in the top of our prototype, which is called the donut. You can see it here. You see the sample going in here at the top. Then you turn the knob to flip the sample, and when the sample is at the bottom, you take a picture. And again, the picture is analyzed by our software and you get a concentration as an outcome. The current prototype is still pretty large, but it can be downscaled by a factor 10 by the use of a miniaturized microscope. The beauty of this simple concept is that by only changing the antibodies on the surface and the particles, this technique can be parallelized for different viral strains. And it is also applicable for different proteins and molecules. So it's very generalizable. So as I said, by only changing the antibodies, you can detect different molecules. So it would also be easy to detect an intact virus. The simplicity of this method is the strength of our biosensor, because it makes it easy to produce and easy to adjust for other viral strains. save the world by simply counting.
Thanks a lot. And there's now indeed room for questioning. Jordi, as a first jury member, would you like to kick off the questions?
Okay, so first of all, thanks for your explanation here. So I just want to ask you how you plan to compact or to design the a proper reader technology to assure a proper operation and the proper counting of the molecules. Or if you can explain a little bit more in detail how you detect the molecule.
I think Fumalayo can answer this question best. Maybe someone can unmute her.
Yeah, so our software is pretty simple. We use the thresholding to make the image we take with the camera black and white, and after that we just count the amount of particles in the image.
And there is no distortion between any other molecules, and you can detect specifically very well the molecule, the size, and so on.
Yes.
Okay, so you have tested also the repetitivity of the measurement system. Okay, that's good.
Yes.
That's good. Thank you. That's all from my side. Congratulations again.
So I have a question somewhat combined to that. So in the current system, you're not using a flow, as it's a stationary flow. You could say a stationary fluid, and then you flip it. Are you convinced that is enough to prevent or also wash away kind of non-specific binding, so kind of low force binding? Is it enough? I mean, gravity is not a huge force, and in any case, also when you apply the fluid, you're not passing by a whole number of analytes. So is it enough to get to capture enough signal, and is it then also good enough to remove the non-selective binding? Can you comment on that?
Yes, I think Sanne can explain best. So if someone can unmute her.
Yeah, so for the non-specific binding, to first go into that, we use several blocking steps. So we block the surface after it's functionalized, and we block the particles after they are functionalized. So in that way, we minimize the non-specific binding. And then we also looked at the samples live. So we have another prototype in which you insert the sample and then you flip it while you look at the sample. And in that way you can see live that all the particles sediment down, and you only are left behind with the ones that are stuck because those are bound. Is that the answer to the question?
Okay, indeed. Well, I think one other element is indeed, I mean, if you pass by enough sample, because you have the amount of sample that's on top of your sensor, that is basically determining how much counting you can do. Mm-hmm. You're not passing by more sample, which of course uses more sample, that and then capture that. But that's but maybe let's move on. I see that Luz has a question.
Yes, thanks for this interesting presentation. I was wondering, so you also showed us one of your applications in the end that you also can detect viruses. How are you sure that you will not bind the virus to multiple spots, and also that not multiple beads will attach to one virus? Because you're counting the beads in the end. So do you know what I mean? Ooh. Awkward. Now there's
Okay, sorry. We had a discussion about who was going to answer this. Well, actually, we are not very sure. We looked at different ways whether you could determine whether you would count a cluster with the software. And yeah, we looked at different ways, like really counting the particles in a cluster and determining the size of the clusters, but it didn't make that much of a difference with the in the end with the number of particles that were bound. Like on about 1,000 of particles, then it would only make a difference of 40 particles when you would differentiate the clusters. So we didn't see this as a very big problem.
But with virus things, so with virus, they can things more. They can attach more to them than you just the molecules you're now looking at. Do you expect then any problems, or do you maybe it can be used? I don't know. Maybe it's an advantage. I have no idea. But did you think about it? Or?
We didn't do what? Can someone unmute Maurits?
Yep, he is able to unmute himself.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so what we did also in the lab was that we tried to change the amount of particles we had in the assay. So that was also a process that was done for the results we wanted to get for the computation. So if we move forward into different strains or different viruses, we can alter the variation of the amount of particles basically in the sample and the particles that are available there. So as a small example, we try to do like a volume distribution of 1-to-1 of particles to HA1 in the beginning, then we went to 1-to-10 and stuff like that. So if we change that, we have control over the dose response curve. So moving forward, there are some steps we can take to reduce clustering as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that's also why we do the blocking again. So blocking and then software was also improved for that.
Thanks. Thanks for the answer.
Okay, we have time for one more small question. Maybe from the audience. I don't see anything in the chat, but so it was very clear, I guess, then. If there's no more questions. So just as a funny one, so how much time do you think you will still, how much time would it still take to get this in a real market-ready solution?
If someone can unmute Maurits again.
Yeah, to get it to a market-ready solution, it's also very important to get the FDA approval, first of all. So in order to do so, we need to continue with the clinical trials. And the point where we are at right now, of course, isn't enough to do so. So it will take, depending on the amount of people we can get and the partnerships we can attract, so depending on the expertise that is within the team still after this competition and expertise we can attract to the team, it can take from 3 to 5 years, hopefully. That will be an aim to get to the market segment.
Okay, thanks.
Get to the market.
That's probably on the optimistic side from my experience, but it's always good to start optimistic. Huh? Okay, then I think if you have time, we finish this session or this presentation. We move on to the next. Thanks a lot, Test. And I'm moving on to the other Dutch team.
Yes. Can you see my presentation already? Yes. All right. Can I start? Okay. One moment. Yes, welcome everyone to the creativity pitch of the UT Plus team. So, for the past 2 years, we experienced one of the biggest worldwide pandemic in history. And this pandemic showed us how unprepared the healthcare system is for these situations. And the problems with the current testing methods are the highest cost for transportation and the long waiting results. And with this in mind, oh, I think this is going well. Yes, with this in mind, we have developed a photonic sensor. This sensor, which only requires a small LED laser source, is much easier and smaller to handle and transport compared with chemical sensors. It also has fast detection and highly accurate results. So, how does it work? The key is in the chip, comprising a group of waveguides and microring resonators where the light is confined. The ring here acts as a filter, so specific wavelengths depending on the refractive index of the surroundings of the microring resonators enter and resonate and then build up in intensity inside the rings. The rings are functionalized with antibodies to which the antigens get binded, as you can also see in the picture. Effective refractive index change due to the attachment of the virus is in order of 10 to -7 refractive index units. This corresponds to a change in the optical path length in order of picometers. The change is linear proportional to the virus concentration, as you can also see in the graph at the left side of the slide. So the setup. This is how our setup looks like. And optical sensing is not a commonly used method in a biosensor, which I think makes our biosensor more original. But the use of antibodies for molecular recognition is more standard, but in combination with light is an innovative principle. We have developed an anti-fouling layer coating for the chips consisting of phosphonates bound to the waveguide and rings and silenced on the rest of the chips. And this layer allows for selective binding of the antigen on waveguides and rings, and this increases the sensitivity of the system. Well, on top of the phosphonates from the anti-fouling layer, biotin and streptofidin were bound. Then biotin-related antibodies were bound to the streptofidin. Yeah, it goes through. And to make our biosensor more sensitive for the required range, an amplifier was used, as you can see here. Yes, and this amplifier was made for 400 nanometers polystyrene beads coated with antibodies. And during their flow through the channel, they will get binds with antigen and show a huge jump due to the change in a bulk refractive index. We then performed experiments using the chip with different samples. The measurements start with flowing the eye water and then shifted to artificial saliva, which can be evidenced from the graph as a huge jump due to the change in the refractive index of the medium. And later, the flow was shifted to an antigen concentration of 100 pg per milliliter of the antigen. And this cannot be visually seen due to the dominance of the thermal noise. So our future work after developing this sensor can be focused on different viruses, because the possibility of having multiple waveguides integrated on a single chip allows for multiplexing and simultaneous detection of different viruses. And this opens opportunities for cheap sensing in both veterinary and human healthcare to combat or prevent the next pandemic. So thank you all for your attention, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask us.
Thanks a lot. Leo, would you like to kick off the questioning?
Yes, I would like to. Thank you for your presentation. I enjoy this idea of using these microresonators. It's unusual, as you also mentioned in your talk and also in your report. But I do have a few questions. The first thing is that you rely on the change in the refractive index in the vicinity of basically your waveguide or your ring resonator. I was wondering, what is the range of the light actually in the fluid and also in the surrounding silicon dioxide, because that basically determines actually the range at which your refractive index has to be changed. And how big is that compared to the molecules and to the beads that you are using?
Somewhere around some nanometers.
Maybe you can come a little bit closer to the microphone, Charlotte. Then everyone can hear you well.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, so it would be like a few tenths of nanometer.
A few tenths of nanometer?
Yeah.
Okay. And that is the range where where the evanescent wave from the light is actually penetrating into the fluid.
Yes.
Okay. A few tenths of nanometer. But then I was wondering, you're using as an amplifier polystyrene particles with a size of 400 nanometer.
Yeah.
Well, that's big compared to this few tenths of nanometer. Does that make sense then to use these big particles? Did you investigate the dependence on the size of the particles, for instance?
Yeah, actually, because the sphere is like a 400 nanometers, we don't want the light need to penetrate completely to the beads.
Tens of micrometers, not nanometers.
Oh, sorry. Actually, it is tens of micrometer, not nanometers.
Yeah. Okay, so that means that, but still the question remains. Then you could maybe use larger particles, and the influence would be larger. Do you have any suggestions of how you could actually improve the amplification? Because I think one of the critical things for the system to work is that you have enough sensitivity, and that seems to be a little bit difficult also in your measurements.
Yeah. Actually, we just selected this particle range so that if we are selecting some bigger particles, it may occupy a large space inside the channel. So we might lose some of the antigen detection itself. So if you are going for smaller particles, it may get attached almost homogeneously on top of the surface. So there's a possibility that we can go like more sensitive. So we can just lower the limit of detection. We can go up to like few hundreds of femtogram per ml as the concentration.
But I have another question about this, because the refractive index of polystyrene is something like 1.45 or so. And it is very close actually to the refractive index of your solution. And I was wondering, isn't it beneficial to use particles that are have a much higher refractive index, for instance, and are they available? Could you think of such a particle?
Yeah, some metallic nanoparticles.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, whether that would not be very beneficial to make them very much smaller, these particles. Like for instance, golden nanoparticles. They are very well known, and they are available in sizes of indeed tens of nanometers. So you can get a very high density of them, but also they have a very high difference in refractive index.
Yeah, that's true. But if you're going for nanoparticles compared with some polymeric beads, first there will be a differ in the size distribution as well as the shape. The refractive index depends on the density as well as the shape, etc. And it will be much costlier to use the nanoparticles compared with the polystyrene beads.
Okay. So that is your motivation for choosing the polystyrene.
We can just for the simpler thing to get what we need.
Yeah. Okay. I have another question. You're using this material selective anti-fouling coating. I found that an interesting concept, which is also not very usually applied. And you're using a phosphate to bind to the aluminium oxide, and you have a siliconization for the silicon dioxide. But I was thinking for a moment about it, and why do you actually need anti-fouling on the silicon dioxide, which is basically far away from your resonator? At least away from your resonator.
Yeah, so we need this anti-fouling layer because we want to avoid the antigens binding unspecifically to the rest of the chip, because our signal comes only from the ring, so the refractive index changes on the ring. So if viruses start binding somewhere else, this is signal that we're losing. So what we want to do is make the the phosphonates just bind on the waveguide and ring. Ideally would be bound only on the ring, but this was much harder to develop. So with waveguide and ring, we get more specificity, just more binding on there. And with the silent, we block the rest of the surface.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very good point. You're just suppressing the loss of your proteins of interest by preventing them to stick to this large silicon dioxide area. Yeah, a good idea. Yeah. Okay. May I ask another question, Mr. Blom? Yeah, I suppose so.
I don't see anyone raising a hand, so please just go ahead. And
okay.
In any case, we don't have the pitch by Barcelona, so we have a little extra time if needed.
Okay.
Please go ahead for now.
Well, I was also thinking about your temperature dependence of your device, because that's also an interesting thing that you've shown actually by beautiful measurement in your results document, where we saw that actually the refractive index is very sensitive to the temperature, and you see you increase the temperature by 1 degree in steps between 20 and 30 degrees. And actually, you see quite a significant shift in the resonance wavelength. I was a little bit worried about the applications, because some people do their tests outside, some do it at home, and there can be quite some differences in the temperature at the location where you apply such a test. Did you think about that, and how would you solve that temperature sensitivity if you want to be able to measure in a sensitive way?
Yeah, so one of the good things of the chip we're using is that we have multiple rings in each channel, so that allows for referencing. So this chip self-references. So in one of the rings, there's no binding. So with this, we can subtract a baseline. So we can eliminate all the background noise due to temperature or due to any noise that can have, and just have the pure signal from the binding.
How would you subtract that? Because you measure a frequency, a resonance frequency.
But we have in the analysis we do, we first have a baseline, and with this baseline you can subtract from the actual signal when the antigen is flowing. So
okay, but what do you do then? Do you combine the two frequencies in a mixer and then look at the difference frequency or so? Because that might be less sensitive to temperature. But I'm not 100% sure about that, but that might be.
Yeah, what we do is we do the we subtract the frequencies.
You subtract simply the frequencies.
Okay.
No, actually, we have like multiple micro ring resonator in the same waveguide, same chip. So few rings are just coated with antibodies. Few rings are not coated with antibodies.
I understand. Yeah.
So the antigen will bind only with antibodies. So when there is any fluctuation in temperature, the noise will be introduced in both the reference ring as well as to the ring which is coated with the antibody. So when we subtract both the baselines, we will subtract the thermal noise and other noises.
Yeah. You just say that you're just looking at the shift in the frequency from the reference resonator.
Yes.
From the one that you measure with the antibodies and actually your detected viruses. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Would you be able to actually increase your sensitivity by a different design of your resonator? Is there also a possibility for that?
Yeah, it is possible. Right now, the ring what we are using is like almost like a 500 micron in diameter. With there are like a multiple resonance peak we are getting. So the distance between two peaks are like almost 500 picometer. So if there will be a shift. We can just measure only up to like a 500 picometer shift. After that, two peaks they will just overlap each other. So we will be losing the data. So if we are designing properly, like increasing or decreasing the diameter of the micro ring, we can just increase the distance between two resonance peak. That will increase the range of our detection.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. Thank you. Okay, I think that's it for me.
Yeah. I think you took most of the questioning time, but I think it's very good to see. Anyone else from the jury would like to pop a question? No. Same for me. Then I think we could just also end this part in time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for your question.
You're welcome. I enjoyed reading your story, so that's quite nice.
Nice.
So there will now be a short video shown to indeed fill up the time. We'll be back with the SensUs pitch at 2:30 Dutch time.
Healthcare professionals around the world are united by a common mission: to help patients lead healthier and longer lives. For more than a century, Siemens Healthineers has pushed the boundaries of medical technology, and people have benefited from every innovation. More precise diagnostics, advanced therapies, better treatment outcomes, and ultimately, a higher quality of life. Our aim is to harness the power of digitalization and connectivity and make healthcare more personal and caring. State-of-the-art imaging and lab diagnostics lead to faster and more accurate diagnoses. Digital integration frees up medical staff from routine tasks, leaving more time for patients. Artificial intelligence and digital twins lay the foundation for treatments that are truly tailored to the needs of each individual patient. Today, we may not know what healthcare will be like in 50 years, but no doubt, we at Siemens Healthineers are at the forefront in shaping it. With the latest technology, with the unparalleled expertise and passion of our employees, with strong partners in scientific research, in close cooperation with our customers, but above all, for people.
When will the next pandemic occur? And more importantly, how can we prepare for this? Today, more than ever, we experience the worldwide spread of a deadly virus. The current situation shows we are in dire need of solutions to be ready to face the next pandemic. That's why the theme of SensUs 2021 is respiratory viruses with a focus on influenza. To keep track of the virus, we need to measure its presence in individuals and the population. Measurements which can be done quickly, easily, and at any location with biosensors. This enables timely diagnosis and treatment, preventing further spread and saving the lives of millions of people. Measuring influenza with biosensors, a future for all of us.
At Micronet, we design, develop and produce state-of-the-art devices for microfluidics and MEMS applications for distribution all over the world. Our products include a broad range of chips in various sizes, as well as complete wafers. We have the capabilities and processes in place to develop tailored solutions from design to manufacturing. For example, a microfluidic chip in a cartridge generates accurate quantitative results within minutes. You innovate constantly to stay on top of the market. Micronet can provide you with crucial core technology parts for your products. For an optimal solution, we offer you a selection of just about any material or combination of materials. Glass, polymers, silicon, or even hybrid combinations of these or other materials. Together with you, our expert engineers devise a solution that meets your needs, taking functionality, scalability, and cost into consideration. Our flexible processes occur in our ISO-certified production facilities in the Netherlands and Germany. For example, we can include surface functionalization, such as spotting picoliter amounts of biomolecules. Quality control and assurance measurements, such as statistical process control and traceability procedures, are embedded according to ISO 9001 and ISO 13458 directives. After release, the product is ready for distribution all over the world. You can start working with a device right away upon delivery and obtain reliable test results. At Micronet, we provide innovative lab-on-a-chip and MEMS solutions, solutions that help our customers improve your products and research, contributing to the quality of life. From idea to design to large-scale production, at Micronet, we're ready to accept your challenge. Like to know more about Micronet's creative product development and manufacturing capabilities? Visit micronet.com and discover what we can do for you.
Turning an electrochemical application into a commercial product is easier said than done. Your resources are limited and speed is essential as the time to market is now. Our OEM Potentiostat products allow you to translate your sensor application quickly into an end-user device. We deliver a full end-user Potentiostat or reader tailored to fit your application and brand, starting at low quantities. You can customize your market-ready solution by selecting the housing, the module, the battery, and wired or wireless connectivity. Our solutions will help you to accelerate in making your electrochemical application ready for commercial use. PalmSens can deliver a custom app for your sensor application, or you can make it yourself using our software development kits and code examples. Contact us for more information or visit our website, palmsens.com/OEM.
A molecular biosensor is a compact device that measures specific molecules for informing us about health and disease. The measured molecules are called biomarkers. A biosensor operates on a sample taken from the body, for example, a drop of blood, or it can be worn on or inside the body for giving continuous measurements. The most well-known biosensor is the glucose sensor, which measures the concentration of glucose in the blood or in the skin. This is very helpful for patients with diabetes. With a biosensor, patients and doctors immediately get the information they need in order to optimize treatment, reduce unnecessary hospital visits, and enable self-management of health and disease. A biosensor consists of 4 major components: a molecular recognition process, a signal generation process, a disposable sensor device, and a reader instrument. Recognition molecules in the biosensor bind to the biomarkers. The recognition molecules are, for example, aptamers, enzymes, or antibodies. The molecular recognition leads to a signal, for example, an optical, electronic, or magnetic signal. All this happens inside a disposable sensor device where the molecules come together. Finally, the reader instrument measures the signal and translates it into information that is meaningful for the user. There are many diseases and many biomarkers, each having different measurement requirements. Also, there are many technological ways how a biosensor can be designed. That's why SensUs was founded, the annual international student competition on sensors for health. The SensUs community accelerates the development of new biosensors for a better quality of life.
You. Yeah, you. What are you going to do next? Be like your mom and dad, or never anything close to that? Be a suit-wearing business guy, or hell no, never ever be one of them. Be someone who listens to the be this or be that. Or just blow them away and do your own thing. Making your own ideas work from day one. At Roland Berger, we know that you see things differently. And guess what? That's exactly what we're looking for. We know that you're ready for the world. Is the world ready for you? Find it out. Give it a shot. With an employer that actually wants you for the real you and you. A company full of people that believes in the power of your original personality. Not a copy, not a number, not a replay. Be the original you.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. And in 1 minute, we'll start with the presentation, the pitch from SensUs.
Hi, thank you. Can I already start sharing my slides?
Yeah, you can start setting up and kick it off at 2:30 sharp, maybe. People that are joining exactly in time. So, please start.
Okay, thank you. So, hi everyone, and welcome to our team SensUs Creativity Pitch. My name is William, and I'm very happy and proud to be able to present to you our biosensor, on which we have been working for the last few months. So first, this is the actual biosensor. Oh, come on. Yes. So it's 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters with a height of 40 centimeters. And it has 4 main components, namely the optical setup, the cartridge, the user interface, and the readout, which I will describe all in further detail in the coming section. But first, let me explain the original technology which was already existing and on which we further built upon. So the technology used for detection is known as extraordinary optical transmission, which uses a special form of plasma resonance to emit a lot of light through nanoholes. These holes are on a gold surface and are smaller than the wavelength of the incoming light. However, due to coupling of plasmons to the surface, a lot of light is going through these holes. Now, to be able to use this configuration to detect biomolecules, we use what is known as sandwich assay. So we put the capture antibody on the surface and detection antibody on the gold nanoparticles. Basically, the way it works is the following. When a gold nanoparticle bound to the hemagglutinin binds the surface, it basically clogs the nearest gold nanohole array, like the hole inside the nanohole array. Once this hole is clogged, it doesn't transmit any more light, which means that it basically forms a shadow. What it looks like, I will show you in a second. So in order to obtain this phenomenon and be able to visualize it, we build our our optical system, and it's fairly simple and only has a few main components. So it has a basic LED light, which goes through a lens, and then a 660 nanometer wavelength filter in order to have the correct wavelength for the plasmonic phenomenon. Then the filtered light goes through the gold nanohole array, which is inside the cartridge, which again I will discuss further. And the scattered light is then captured by the objective and analyzed using simple CMOS camera. As you can see, this setup is fairly simple and can easily be changed. Now, what you're seeing here is basically what we are seeing through the sensor over time. So as I said, once a gold nanohole array actually once a gold nanoparticle binds to the surface, it clogs the nearest hole. This is what causes these small dark dots to appear. In order to translate this to a signal, we basically count the appearance of these dark dots over time. As you can imagine, this requires a lot of image processing. And most importantly, in order to be fast, we had to incorporate it such that as we acquire the images, the image processing was actually already occurring, meaning that we were acquiring images for 4 minutes, and actually at the end of those 4 minutes, immediately obtain the concentration, such that the processing didn't take any time. Next, we also had to adapt to the sample preparation, because even though the basic technology had been shown to work on blood and PBS, it had never been tested on saliva. So to do so, what we did is we spin the saliva for 1 minute in order for the larger proteins, the mucins, to actually get centrifuged to the bottom, and we then use the supernatant for the analysis. Now we get to the cartridge, the most important part. So in order to increase the amount of binding over time, instead of just using gold nanohole array with the chamber on top, we built a microfluidic chip. This means that we're actually able to have a flow on top of the chip, so we're not diffusion limited anymore, and we could reduce the height of the chip, between the chip and the height of the top of the channel. This means that the particle had needed less time to diffuse to the surface, and thus we could have more binding over time. But to make sure that the depletion region stayed small and we didn't lose time for detection, we added a quick flow of 50 microliters per minute. Since we are only using a very small sample of 40 microliters, that would mean the particles would barely have any time to bind to the surface. Hence, our solution was to flow the sample back and forth. This means that by flowing it fast, we had a small depletion region, but by flowing it back and forth, we're able to not lose any analyte. Next, to automate this process, we used a microfluidic pump provided by our sponsors, AMF. This pump allowed us to very easily change the flow and also very easily decide the sample size, so the volume we were flowing over the chip. The flow was fully automated because we coded it, so we only had to press a button. And as I said, it's very adaptable. Or the future improvements we still want to do would be to integrate the interface for the image acquisition and the analysis in one API, so we don't have 2 different screens, and automate the entire sample preparation. So we don't need the pipetting, we don't use flow. The assembly of the cartridge could also be automated, and the image processing is already fully automated. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your nice presentation. Very clear, but of course there are some questions, and this time it's my turn to kick off the questions. First of all, so you mentioned in your presentation, but also in your document, indeed you can detect single binding events, but also you see actually in your image, and maybe that also happens in practice, that there could be much more binding occurring in one of these holes or around. I mean, they're not that small. So are you actually able to detect really single binding events? Can you motivate that, or is it a string? Or?
Yeah, so it depends on the concentration. So for example, if the concentration is very high, then a lot of particles will bind simultaneously, so it can be quite difficult to detect single binding events. But if the concentration is fairly low, like we were able to go to like 50 picogram per milliliter, then at that point, sometimes you can really see a single dark spot appearing, which is due to a single nanoparticle binding. Those are tests that have been done before, and basically the way it worked is they made a gold nanohole array, deposited a single gold nanoparticle near it, and then imaged it. And then you could see that only one hole was dark because only one gold nanoparticle bound. And if multiple gold nanoparticles bound, at least 2 holes were clogged. So the size of the dark spot was increased.
Okay, so it's really digital. Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. You have another question? So now you're actually centrifuging the sample.
Yes.
Which is it's a kind of a logical step to do to make life a bit easier on the cartridge side. But in the end, if you want to go to a point of care solution, which would be nice, yeah, how would you foresee to do that, or replace it with something else? Can you please comment on that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Also, especially because at the moment we're detecting hemagglutinin, which is much smaller than the actual virus. So if you start centrifuging, the separation won't work as well as it does now, because the entire virus is much heavier than the hemagglutinin. So what we thought of a few things. For example, as I said, we're using gold nanoparticles. What we're trying, we thought of, we haven't been able to test it yet, is to use magnetic particles. So use magnetic particles, which also have a high extinction coefficient, because that's needed for like the shadow to appear, basically. And then as you mix them with the sample, I mean, you know how it works, right? You have a little magnetic field on the side, the magnetic particles will stick on it, and then you just take out the solution. So that would be one solution too. But then again, as you say, it's true that you need pipetting for that. I think you can automate it in a microfluidic system, if you do it correctly.
That's correct, indeed. Okay, thanks. And those were my 2 first questions. I'd like to give also the floor to the other jury members. Luz, please.
Yeah, thanks for this nice presentation. I like the idea that you look at shadows through a nanopore kind of thing. I was wondering if what you showed is that you made a microfluidic channel on top of it. Because you say, well, that is going faster, then you do not have to wait, because I think you would play with the depth of your channel. Why did you make a very shallow, it is shallow, but not so wide channel? Because if you make it wider, you can do multiple measurements, or you can increase it, or you can maybe do multiplexing. Did you consider that?
Yes, exactly. So you're right, we could have made the channel larger. The reason for that is, so later on, if you want to do multiplexing, so for example, we want to test for multiple diseases at the same time, so if you want to test influenza A, B, etc., then we could do that. But at the moment, we're only looking at one antibody spot, which I think you can see here. Let me just go to the next slide. Like, as you can see here, there's one antibody spot, and it's only 150 micrometers in size. So if you would make it large, since we're only looking at single antibody spot, it wouldn't change anything. So yes, if you want to do multiplexing, we could just take a larger field of view, and then we could indeed make the channel larger, exactly. What we're also thinking of doing is putting multiple channels next to each other. So you can use one gold nanohole array like multiple times.
And so what you often see also with these kind of tests is that you have like for instance, a pregnancy test, you have always a control line, a control spot. Did you consider this as well for in your system?
Yes, actually, in this one, on the left, you barely see it. I think for you, it's on the right, actually. It's actually a control spot next to it. It's a spot of polyclonal antibodies. And as you can see, what's really nice is, yeah, there's really no binding. It works quite well. we actually did a free test.
There is no binding, but what you want for in the case, I get what you mean, but what you see with the pregnancy test is that you always get, if you're pregnant, you will get 2 lines, and if you're not pregnant, you will always get 1 line. To be sure that the test is carried out in the right manner. Did you consider this kind of thing?
Okay, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. That's a good question, actually. I guess what you could do is something where you have like at the moment, the gold nanoparticles are fully covered with monoclonal antibodies from agglutinin. Maybe you could do on one of the other tests, you could have a control, control spot, where you put a polyclonal antibody, which is able to recognize the free antibody on the gold nanoparticle.
Thanks for the answer.
Okay, Leo, please shoot your question.
Yes. I have a question, a very technical question actually, about your data processing. I'm quite impressed that you're saying that you do your data processing in real time. I know a little bit, we have a little bit experience with this subject as a research group. And I was just wondering how you actually cope with the things that we, for instance, see in this movie. What you see is you see particles floating in front of this surface, and that makes it rather difficult to get a very reliable counting going on. So how do you implement it, and how do you correct for these type of artifacts?
Yeah, we're very happy you're asking this question because the code was really, really complicated on this project, if I'm being honest. So even actually, the one you're seeing right now, the flow isn't on. So in reality, there's actually much more stuff going around when you see it.
Yeah,
so the way we got rid of it is, first of all, the intensity, the change in intensity to the particle due to the binding of a gold nanoparticle is very strong. As you can see, like the spots are quite dark in comparison to other noise you can see on the image. So first thing we do is we threshold the image to binarize it. We also use, since we have a flow, we use a median filter. So we take 5 images, then like each pixel is ranked based on intensity, so that if, for example, like you can see here, like a little bubble passes, it's normally with the median filter gets rid of it. So we don't have that problem. We don't have the problem of moving objects. There is a little bit of noise, but by thresholding, we can get rid of it quite well. And I'm still forgetting one more thing. We're filtering based on size. The dark spot due to the gold nanoparticle has, as I said, it really influences one gold nanohole, like one hole, but it can also, so we know the size of the shadow. So if the size of the shadow is too small or too large, we discard it, we don't count it. For example, you can see here on the right, I don't know if you see some spots are a bit large, they look like aggregates kind of.
Yeah.
These would also be discarded because those are probably gold nanoparticles that somehow started interacting and stick to the surface for probably another reason.
Doesn't limit that your accuracy in your measurement when you have a high density of those gold nanoparticles on your surface, because then they almost look like clusters, and then it really becomes very sensitive to your thresholding.
Yeah, it's a good question, and yeah, so we definitely have to verify the gold nanoparticle concentration. That's for sure. Like you can't go too high, else it's a problem. At the moment, our concentration is 0.26 nanomolars. Like, yeah, I know these numbers don't mean a lot, but. Actually, at the moment, it wasn't too big of a problem. No, the filtering worked quite well, and there's no excessive binding. As long as you mix the nanoparticles well before, there's no problem.
And how do you do this? Because you basically have a camera that spits out images, but if you want to process them in real time, you basically have to do this in the memory of a processor, for instance.
Yeah. So we found kind of a clever way to do it. As I said, we're using 2 different interfaces for the measurements, like taking the images and the processing. So basically, what the imaging does is just saves the picture over time. So 1 picture every 2 seconds. And the other code actually checks if a new picture has been acquired. And as soon as 5 pictures have been acquired, he does the processing, and then he stores the result. So the way we do it at the moment is every time you make a result, you delete the previous folder and you remake a new one. That's how we deal with the memory problem.
Okay, but you can still get away with actually storing the pictures on disk and then reading and executing. Okay, because we are trying a similar thing, but then actually with a higher time resolution with frames of which only lasts 0.01 seconds.
Okay. Yes.
And then you have to process everything in memory without storing, because otherwise you cannot get enough. You're not fast enough, and you're slowed down by the storage and the reading. But okay, it's good that you have been looking into this and programming it. It's quite nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and perfect timing. Here with we can switch to the next team, which is the Pulse team from Belgium.
Okay,
and thanks
awesome.
thanks to the SensUs team.
Yeah, good luck to the other teams too.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear and see the screen? I guess so. So, yeah. Then can someone quickly answer? Because
Yes, we can hear you and see the screen.
Great, thank you very much. So hello everyone and welcome to the creativity pitch of Pulse. Today, as a team, we're very proud to represent Belgium and the KU Leuven in this incredible competition. And today, I'll guide you through the characteristics of our biosensor, and I'll highlight our main pride, the creativity of our concept. One of the major strengths of our biosensor is its extremely user-friendly aspects, as it doesn't require any sample preparation, it's easy to manipulate, and uses a smartphone as a readout tool and an app which makes it accessible to a large public. Concretely, it's rather simple. Saliva is directly deposited in our microfluidic cartridge, which is in turn inserted into the docking device for further readouts. Now, of course, this is a kind of simplistic representation, so let's dive into the specifics. We designed a 2-reservoir microfluidic cartridge. The salivary sample will be deposited in inlet A and eventually end up in a reservoir A. That reservoir contains magnetic beads that will be displaced through sliding the cartridge over 3 electromagnets in our docking device. As you can see, the signal will be generated in our second reservoir. But how is that signal generated? Ladies and gentlemen, this is where the bioassay jumps in. Our bioassay comprises 3 key elements: Aptamer Detection, enzyme signal generation, and CRISPR signal amplification. Basically, reservoir A contains aptamer inhibitor complexes, as well as enzyme functionalized beads. So when saliva enters the first reservoir, H1 particles, if any, will bind to the aptamers, causing the dissociation of the inhibitor from the aptamer. The loose inhibitor will then be able to bind the enzyme and activate the enzyme on beat. At this stage, the cartridge will slide over the electrodes and displace the functionalized magnetic beads to the second reservoir. Reservoir B is filled with molecular beacons that can then be cleaved by the active enzymes, and this results in the separation of the fluorophore from the quencher, allowing signal generation. Once the molecular beacon strands are released in solution, they can find their complementary CRISPR RNA strand and activate the Cas13 protein. Once the Cas13 protein is activated, it can cleave the reporters that are also present in the reservoir, and this results in the separation of, again, the fluorophore from the quencher, and this time it amplifies the signal. So the scheme might seem complex, but in essence, it's just a simple cascade of events. All right, so now we have our signal. What's next? The readout. In our assay, we use a smartphone for that purpose. So while the sample is being illuminated by a blue LED light, the smartphone takes a picture of the signal, sends it to a remote server, which processes the data, and then sends the concentration of the analyte back to the app of the smartphone. The user's data can be stored in a database, which can further be sold to instances or companies that could use it for further analysis of influenza infection rates. So this is the entire concept of our biosensor. But what about its creativity? On the one hand, we use electromagnets to avoid sample preparation. We use a smartphone as a readout tool with an app, which makes the biosensor not only user-friendly, but also innovative. And on the other hand, we use aptamers for detection mRNA enzymes for signal generation, and CRISPR, the 2020 Nobel Prize winning technology, as a way to amplify our signal. So all in all, it's the combination of all these elements that render our biosensor absolutely unique. Ladies and gentlemen, we are Pulse, and we believe our concept holds great promise for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very clear. Then I would like to give the first opportunity for questioning to Yasmina.
Okay, so thank you for your energetic and clear presentation. Well, I have a question about the magnetic nanoparticles. I don't know if you can explain a little bit more what kind of functionalization you are using in those particles in order to avoid aggregation before they contact with your sample.
Thank you for your question. I will leave Wout answering that question if he's there.
Yes, I'm here, and I think I can mute myself. All right. Yeah, so we did quite some tests on aggregation of the beads, because of course, in order to transport them, you first draw them into a central dot, you transport them, and then you have to be able to somehow redisperse them in your second reservoir. And we saw that using magnets, that was actually possible, even with non-functionalized beads. So we didn't really take too much additional steps in the functionalization to avoid the aggregation specifically. Of course,
you're using kind of 2 steps for magnetic interaction with the particles.
Yeah. So for the transportation, you just keep one magnet activated at all time to keep the beads in place. But for the mixing, you activate the 3 electromagnets in a sequential way, so that there's a gradient in magnetic field and the beads are kind of vortex around, you could say.
Okay. And then the other question, I don't know if you happen to try different cell phones in order to see how the different cameras, or if you take that into account, or that would be any kind of requirement specifically for the different cameras of the different cell phones?
Well, we didn't really try a lot of different smartphone models, of course, also due to economic reasons. But the main advantage is that in like Samsung and iPhone both use the same kind of CMOS chips for their cameras. So there really shouldn't be a problem there. The only difference, of course, being that the layout of the cameras is different. But with the cameras itself, there should really not be a problem.
Okay. Well, I don't have any more questions. Good luck, and thanks for your nice presentation.
But Luz has. Luz?
Yes, thanks for this interesting presentation. I'm also a little bit working with CRISPR amplification, and I was wondering how can you determine the concentration afterwards? So I know that it is in a really, if it starts cleaving, it cleaves forever, more or less. So how do you then know what the concentration was of the virus particles or the virus antigens that were in your sample?
I'm going to elaborate on this question. Thank you for the nice question. Actually, we weren't able to do further experiments. If we would proceed with the experiments, then we would have done multiple calibrations so that we would know, with a certain amount of a virus particle, and then calibrate it with the fluorescent signal we would get out of that.
So you expect that there will be a difference in fluorescent based after the concentration?
Yeah, because a different amount of CRISPR's of Cas proteins will be activated.
Ah, okay. But do you know that every Cas protein will just cut, isn't it? It will not end after 100 cleavages. It will just something what's in the neighborhood. They will start cutting, isn't it?
Also, when for example, the test we expect it will take more or less 10 minutes. So if we stop at 10 minutes, then depending on how much Cas proteins are activated, if more Cas proteins are activated, then in those 10 minutes, a higher fluorescent signal will be created.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for your answer.
Okay. It would be nice to get some questions from the audience as well, of course. Nobody feels obliged to do that. Trying to see if I can come up with the question myself then. It's quite clear, of course. So, but maybe, of course, I'm kind of from the microfluidic cartridge field myself. So maybe you could comment. You already have a kind of a microfluidic cartridge, but could you comment somewhat how you could make this really a lot more market ready / user friendly? I mean, you're made quite some steps there already, but it's not something you could use at home yet, just by anyone. So what steps would you still need to take?
Well, about the microfluidic cartridge, I mean, to make it as user-friendly as possible, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, make it as easy as possible to introduce the sample into the cartridge. So the idea that we had on how to do it was to use like a kind of funnel and hydrophilically coat the first reservoir of the chip so that the sample is basically drawn in. But yeah, then on the second reservoir, I'm not exactly sure how you could make it more user-friendly on the chip itself.
If I can add to that, we also thought of different ways, of course, to make sure that the chip can be stored in just a room temperature, etc. And to be able to, for instance, we also thought about the saliva bubbles that could be. There is this technology in our lab which is quite patent sensitive that would enable the retention of the air bubbles in the saliva so that we have a smooth liquid to work with. Also, for the third, we could think of lyophilization. This is also something that is done in our lab, and so this consists in lyophilizing sorry, the particles, and this would only be rendered liquid, let's say, when it gets into contact with saliva. So these are all strategies that we could think of to make it even more user-friendly in a way that we wouldn't need to store the cartridge in a fridge or in a cold place, etc. This would also allow to use the cartridge in low outcome countries where cold rooms and temperatures are not always at hand. So those were things that we thought of.
Oh, no, very good. I mean, indeed, if you want to have a chip that fills by capillary reaction, the air bubbles in saliva are annoying. So it's good that you thought about that in a very patent sensitive way. But that's fine, of course. So, but good to see that that's on your radar. Yeah, if there's no more questions, then I think we can close your pitch session here with. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the presentation and the answers. And then we have 2 minutes to switch to the Luxus team.
Thank you.